Apple just told its component suppliers something that quietly changes what the iPhone 18 Pro Max actually costs you, and it has nothing to do with cameras or colors. It's about money, who pays it, and how much more you're about to. Multiple analysts, including Jeff Pu of GF Securities, are now warning that the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max could see a price hike well beyond what anyone expected just a few months ago, potentially over $250, pushing the Pro Max toward $149.99. If you've been holding on to your current iPhone hoping this was the year to finally upgrade, drop where you're leaning right now, because that number is about to matter a lot more than any spec sheet. For a while, the working theory was that Apple would keep things steady. Back in February, Pu said Apple planned to hold the line at $199 and $109.99 for the Pro and Pro Max, the same prices as last year. In May, he doubled down, calling it an aggressive pricing strategy. The kind of line that made people relax a little and assume this generation would be business as usual. Then something shifted. And that shift is the same thing driving prices up across the entire tech industry right now. A brutal squeeze on memory and silicon that's already hit Macs, iPads, and even the Vision Pro. The A20 Pro chip is a big part of why. Built on TSMC's advanced 2nm process, it's expected to be one of the most sophisticated chips ever put inside a smartphone, and that jump in manufacturing precision isn't cheap. We're talking meaningfully better performance, sharper graphics handling, stronger on-device AI processing, and improved efficiency, all packed into a die that costs more to produce than anything Apple has used before. That's before you even factor in rising NAND storage and RAM prices, which are squeezing every phone maker right now, not just Apple. Put those two pressures together, and it makes a lot more sense why Counterpoint Research is separately estimating the Pro Max could cost around $200 more than last year's model, with IDC landing in a similar range on its own, using completely different data. Three separate research firms arriving at close to the same number independently is hard to write off as a coincidence. When the analysts stop disagreeing, that's usually the moment to actually pay attention. Apple isn't just letting costs pile up unchecked, though, and this is where it gets a little more interesting than a simple price hike story. Behind the scenes, reports suggest the company has been negotiating hard with its component suppliers to shave costs wherever it can, trying to offset exactly this kind of pressure before it reaches your wallet. The strategy seems to be spend big on the one chip that actually changes how the phone performs, then quietly claw back savings on the parts most people will never think twice about, the kind of components that never make it into a review but still cost real money to produce. Whether that's enough to keep the final price hike from climbing even further than in $250 is still an open question, and honestly, we probably won't know for sure until Apple actually stands on stage in September. Now, what does that extra money actually buy you? Because the Pro Max isn't just getting more expensive, it's getting real changes in places people will notice the second they pick the phone up. The dynamic island is the biggest one, and it's been sitting untouched since it first showed up on the iPhone 14 Pro back in 2022. Leakers, including the Weibo account Digital Chat Station, describe Apple testing under display Face ID technology across the entire Pro lineup, which would let the company shrink that pill-shaped cutout dramatically for the first time since it was introduced. The iPhone 18 Pro is rumored to land around a 6.27-inch display while the Pro Max climbs to somewhere between 6.86 and 6.9 inches, making it one of the biggest screens Apple has ever shipped on a phone this size. There's still expected to be a small punch hole for the camera itself, but most of the sensor array Face ID relies on would move beneath the glass. It sounds like a small detail written down on paper, in your hand staring at the screen every day. It changes how the entire front of the phone feels, and it's the kind of change that's easy to underestimate until you're actually holding it. There's another layer to that display story too, and it's one that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the leak cycle. Reports point to next-generation LTPO panels across the Pro models, meaning smoother scrolling, more responsive animations, and better battery efficiency all at the same time. Normally that's a trade-off. Smoother usually means more power draw. Getting both without sacrificing one for the other would be a genuine step forward, not just a marketing bullet point. The camera is where the leaks stopped being guesses and actually turned into something closer to confirmation, and this part is worth slowing down for. In July, a diagnostics log pulled from a trove of internal Tata Electronics files, leaked online by the ransomware group WorldLeaks, surfaced publicly, and according to Notebook Check, that log confirmed a new main sensor for the iPhone 18 Pro Max, the Sony IMX905, replacing the sensor used in last year's model. This isn't a leaker's guess based on a supply chain rumor. This is an internal calibration file. That same log confirmed variable aperture support built directly into the hardware through a dedicated calibration block. meaning the camera can now physically widen or narrow the opening that lets light in, adjusting on the fly to whatever scene is in front of it. Low light shots should come out noticeably brighter with less noise, and you get finer control over background blur, closing the gap between phone photography and dedicated cameras just a little more than last year did. The rest of the rear array is expected to hold steady at 48 megapixels across the main, ultrawide, and periscope telephoto lenses with 4x zoom, while the front camera reportedly sits at 18 megapixels, now working through that new under-display Face ID system instead of a visible notch. Here's a smaller change most people are sleeping on, and it's the kind of detail that tells you more about Apple's mindset than any of the flashy upgrades do. The camera control button, the physical shutter key Apple introduced on the iPhone 16 with a lot of fanfare, might disappear entirely on this generation. Reports suggest engagement with it came in lower than Apple hoped, and the production cost apparently isn't justifying keeping it around anymore. Apple walking back a feature instead of doubling down on it is rare. This is a company that usually commits to an idea for years, even when the early reception is lukewarm. If the camera control button really does get quietly dropped, it tells you how closely Apple is auditing every single dollar spent on this phone right now, right down to features that were front and center in commercials just 2 years ago. Battery life looks like a clean, uncomplicated win in an otherwise complicated story. Multiple outlets, including Tom's Guide, place the Pro Max around 5,100 mAh, a slight but real bump over last year's capacity, and combined with the A20 Pro's efficiency gains and the new LTPO Plus display working together, real-world battery life could improve by more than that raw number alone suggests. Apple is also expected to debut its first fully in-house cellular modem, the C2, inside this generation. A project years in the making that could finally cut Apple's dependence on outside modem suppliers for good, something the company has been quietly building toward since it acquired its modem division years ago. On top of all of that, color leaks suggest a real shift away from the neutral tones of recent years, with names like dark sherry, burgundy, coffee brown, and deep purple floating around, a noticeably richer, warmer palette than what shipped last generation, and a departure from the more muted colorways Apple has leaned on recently. Then, there's the part that reframes everything you just heard, so stick with me for this one. The iPhone 18 Pro Max isn't launching alone this September. Apple is reportedly bringing its first foldable iPhone to the same event, and depending on which leaker you trust, it could carry a book-style design with a smaller outer display around 5.5 inches and a much larger 7.8-inch inner display when unfolded, built around a titanium frame with an aluminum interior to help manage heat. Some reports even claim Apple has found a way to nearly eliminate the visible crease that plagues every other foldable on the market right now. A genuine first for the category, if it actually holds up once the device ships in volume. IDC has floated an average selling price for that foldable around $2,500, which suddenly makes the Pro Max's rumored $200 to $300 price hike look almost modest sitting right next to it. Funny how that works. One leak makes a number sound outrageous, and the very next leak makes that same number look like a bargain. My honest read, and I want to be clear this is a prediction, not a confirmed fact, is that the price hike is real, and it lands closer to the $200 to $300 range than the more optimistic estimates that were floating around earlier this year. Apple has already raised prices on iPads, Macs, and the Vision Pro this year. And the same silicon and memory pressure hitting the rest of the industry doesn't skip iPhones just because they're the company's flagship product and biggest revenue driver. Most people will pay it anyway, because carrier financing spreads that extra cost into just a few more dollars a month, and Apple has gotten very good at making a big number feel small once it's stretched across 24 or 36 monthly payments. The real question, the one that actually matters here, is whether under-display Face ID, the variable aperture camera, and the A20 Pro chip add up to enough of a genuine leap to justify writing that bigger check, or whether this ends up being the generation where people finally start holding on to what they already have for one more year. Which side are you on? Let me know in the comments whether that price jump feels worth it for what's coming, or if this is the year you finally sit one out. And if you want the next leak the moment it breaks, hit subscribe now. There's a lot more coming before September, and I'd rather you hear it here first.